Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as FormBX257, here to bring you another 1980s and 90s G.I. Joe tour review. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the Cobra Arctic Assault Vehicle, the 1991 Ice Saber. Now, the Ice Saber makes its first comic book appearance in the Old comic run of G.I. Joe in issue number 136, and makes its first cartoon appearance in the Deke animated TV episode titled The Eliminator. Now, in photographs, and maybe even this video, it may seem like the Ice Saber is a small vehicle, but it's actually not. It's actually closer to a medium-sized vehicle, something which you would normally see with a figure. Unfortunately, Hasbro stopped marketing medium-sized vehicles with figures around 1990 and onwards. Now, while this thing is around 7 inches wide, nothing to sneeze at, of course, it is a whopping 16 inches long. Now, admittedly, some of that length is the skis poking out and the rocket launcher and the treads poking out beyond the Ice Saber's body. Up front, the aforementioned skis, which are on these arms. The arms are actually keyed together so they move up and down, but the skis themselves are independent. Now, I'm not sure if originally this was meant to be quite stiff enough to hold up the body, because if you did have them like flush like that, you could have different ride heights. But as such, mine is just goes kind of flat. But even then, if you run it across a surface, you do get the sense that this is adjusting for different terrain. Behind that, and to either side of the cockpit, we have these running boards with 3 foot pegs each. So you have 6 in total that can ride on the side of the vehicle. As you can see, the canopy does not actually cover the entire cockpit. There's quite a bit exposed here. However, on the sides there are these little armored slats. And speaking of these slats, the canopy itself is a solid piece. It's not clear in any way, but it does have little opening peepholes for the front driver. And this is the most unusual cockpit in the entire G.I. Joe run. As you can see, there are 3 seats here for 3 figures. And there are some monitors and controls up here for the driver. But you'll notice that this thing does have a little knob here, and that is so that you can rotate this entire thing around. In fact, there's a hole in the canopy itself, so you can continue to do that even when this thing is closed. Virtually any figure can fit in here. Being able to fit in here and rotate the cockpit, well, some figures are actually better for this than others. I find the Snow Serpent 2s actually work the best, which isn't surprising seeing as it's almost like this vehicle was tailor-made for them, as they're released in the same year. Although I do have to admit, I'm really not sure what the point of a rotating inner cockpit was for. Each of the seats has a back peg to secure the figure, and they will need to be secured, believe me. Because when you rotate this thing in such a small place, the likelihood is the feet are going to actually grab one of the edges here and sort of knock the figure out of place and probably into the next figure as you're rotating this. But as you can see, Hasbro went the extra mile here and actually detailed each portion between the seats differently. And finally, behind that, we have the rear treads, which of course are not real moving treads at all, and need a fake wheel in order to help this thing roll around. And while this thing is heavily detailed, the fact of the matter is that they've actually gone and put an orange wheel here, which kind of sticks out the back, rather than just being hidden underneath here. Very strange that they couldn't just match up the color with the rest of the blue of the tread. And even the tread pattern and the pattern on the wheel is completely different. So I'm not quite sure what they were going for with this. Starting at the front again, we have this chin cannon, which is actually doubles as a flamethrower. As you can see, we do have this type of canister-like thing here and a hose here, which kind of makes sense. You might want to have a flamethrower on the front of your ice vehicle just to melt objects out of the way. And it moves from side to side. It doesn't go all the way around. It does have a stopper at the pivot point. All the way at the back, we have more traditional cannons here on little turrets, one on either side of the vehicle. The turrets themselves can move all the way around 360 degrees, and the cannons themselves can not only elevate more, but also depress quite a bit, and of course flip all the way around if you so desire. And last but certainly not least is the missile launcher behind the cannons. This thing is almost as unique as that strange rotating cockpit, but this thing is far more cooler. It, of course, is a spring-loaded missile launcher, launching 2 of its 4 missiles, as well as being able to fire caps. The missile launcher doesn't swivel around, but it does elevate. It's supposed to hold at least 2 positions here, but mine kind of doesn't anymore. It only holds the vertical position, which is perfectly fine for displays. But as you can see, on the ends of the arms holding the whole missile launcher up, there are these little notches, which unfortunately on mine are a little bit worn away. So somewhere around here it would have held a position, and somewhere down here it would have held a position, but mine just kind of flops all the way down, and the bottom of the missile launcher just kind of rests on the top of the treads on the back here. You get 4 of these missiles. There's a very interesting little design on the middle there, but only on one side. The last items that the Ice Saber originally came with were 2 standard 8-shot ring caps. So Hasbro didn't leave you hanging. You didn't have to go out and buy these like batteries or anything. They actually gave you 2 of them. And of course these are standard ring caps that you can still buy today. Here I have a rocket launcher from my junk pile. And I'm going to use this as my demonstration of how to fire the missiles and the caps, because quite frankly the one that's actually on my Ice Saber is a little bit fragile. And what you're supposed to do is you're actually supposed to pull the trigger back until it locks into place, like all the way back, and then you put the missiles in. You really can't do that with without the trigger actually being pulled all the way back. Of course the ones on the side are just dummy holes. It's the 2 in the middle which actually launched missiles. And you can actually hear them spring into action there. Now with this thing locked back, you can finally use these little buttons here, the left or the right one. And rather counterintuitively, you have to push these things up. So you push this one up, and this thing fires off with quite a bit of force. And if you want to launch both of the front 2 middle missiles at the same time, you can do so by actually flicking the trigger up. So you flick it up, and now for my favorite part, firing off the caps. You actually put the cap right in here, and that is part of the mechanism of the side trigger. Unfortunately, that means that you can't fire off the caps by using the back portion buttons here, because they don't activate this portion. So in order to fire off this thing, you'd have to be either firing off both of the missiles or none at all, which is what I'm going to do here. Of course, you just lock this thing back, so you have better access to this, which is a metal pin. You load it in by putting the cup side down and over that little metal pin there, which is a little bit difficult to do, and you kind of have to angle it in there and just sort of squeeze it in and hope that everything kind of aligns up like this one did. Well, there seems to be this long shelf here, which isn't really necessary for a single roll cap. You would think that it would be meant for a string cap instead. And in fact, they do fit in here. They fit in here, and it kind of looks like it would have been a little bit more efficient to use this just kind of like an ammo belt, just kind of going along here, just as you're using the cap. I do, however, find that the base of any string comes out a little bit far beyond the cup of the actual cap itself, making it a little bit difficult to put in there, because Beside the metal portion here, we also have these raised portions which actually kind of stick out. So I guess it's actually a little bit better meant for a roll cap than it is for something going straight along, which is really unfortunate because, well, like I said, it kind of looks like this thing was originally designed for that. If you're going to try this out with your own Ice Saber, remember to wash this thing with a bit of soap and water afterwards, as these caps are a bit corrosive on the old metal. The Ice Saber has a variant box, one picturing the prototype on the back and the other picturing a production vehicle. It seems they used a string of caps on the prototype photo, although the contents state it comes with ring caps. Also changed are the graphics depicting the cap-firing launcher, with the prototype photo version having a sticker blocking out some text. Neither variant is harder to find than the other, it seems though. The 1991 Ice Saber was the 90s answer to the 1987 Cobra WOLF. They both have very similar designs, like a very sleek overall profile, tracks at the back, skis at the front, and of course they also have missiles here. And while this thing had torpedoes and a top gun, this thing had rear guns and a front gun, and they're pretty much evenly matched. However, I know some people would say that the Cobra WOLF still wins out overall with its overall subdued color scheme and the fact that it includes a figure. Now keep in mind that yes, it is the 90s and you're going to have a lot of bright colors. So I honestly don't find the orange too obtrusive. It is, of course, counterbalanced by the dark blue. And the fact of the matter is that while this didn't include a driver, it was a tiny bit cheaper. The Joes didn't have much of an Arctic force back in 1991, so I'm not really sure exactly what the opposite number for the Ice Saber would have been on the Joe side. So going back 1 year for 1991, we have the massive Avalanche tank. This thing is pretty much twice the price point of the Ice Saber, and it did come with a figure, so I'm not really sure that this is a very fair comparison. However, I feel more confident comparing this to a G.I. Joe vehicle from the year even prior to that, the 1989 Arctic Blast. While this is a vehicle which came with a figure, it is actually a very small vehicle, so it compares very favorably to the price point that the Ice Saber was in. You'll notice that it also has a very quirky design. Skis at the front, wheels at the back, and of course, while this thing doesn't have as many missiles as the Ice Saber, it does have more cannons, and of course, it is actually a very bright, colorful Arctic vehicle. Very strange for 1989, but definitely looks like an opposite number to the Ice Saber. If you're looking for a 1991 Ice Saber on the aftermarket, this is something which is extremely difficult to find completely intact in all one go. However, it is a very common vehicle to find with just some parts of it missing, or just the parts themselves. Now, the reason for this is that all the blue plastic on this vehicle is extremely fragile. It's like it's made out of some type of unstable material, kind of a lot like the Transformers gold plastic syndrome. And the really unfortunate part about the Ice Saber design is that all of the blue plastic is used for stress points. So you have the canopy hinge, which often breaks off. You have the back pegs on the seats, which can break off in the figures. You have the front skis, which are, for some strange reason, hollow on the front. Those can crack off. You have the clips holding the machine guns here. Those can crack off. You have the hidden latch, which holds the back treads onto the back of the body. That can crack off. And everything about the missile launcher is fragile, because you're supposed to do so much of it with your hands, and there's so much under pressure here. Like the trigger, which is supposed to snap forward, the springs inside, the buttons at the back, which you're supposed to lift up instead of push down or in, which is very counterintuitive, and I can see a lot of kids breaking that accidentally. And then, of course, there's the arms which hold the missile launcher up. this bar is usually broken because, as you can see, it's a very strange way of actually fitting this thing in the first place. So that could just snap off when you're putting this vehicle together back in the day. Now that's one of the reasons why I used my my junkyard missile launcher instead of the one which is actually on the vehicle, because I really don't want to press my luck when it comes to actually fiddling around with this thing. It's intact to stay that way, really. Honestly, if you do find one which is intact, you might not want to ship it very far, because even with the best packaging, I can still see this thing just kind of disintegrating within a shipping box. This is really something that you have to basically carry home in your own two hands if you actually do find one intact, or relatively intact, or at least with all the blue parts intact. I think it's kind of worth it as a premium vehicle, but it's also something which you could probably put together yourself with enough time and patience. Despite being a fairly large, fairly complex vehicle, it did not come with a driver. The canopy does not a rocket launcher. Not only is this capable of actually spring-loaded firing missiles. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.